Hi everybody, I'm Tony. In this video, we're stepping away from the perspective of the great leader and look at North Korea through the eyes of an ordinary person. And the source for today's story is the book called Dear Leader. What makes this book so powerful is that it's not about some random person. It's the story of someone who used to be very close to Kim Jong-il, someone he trusted and admired. But eventually, this man fell from grace, dropped all the way down the social ladder, and finally escaped North Korea. So if I had to pick one de facto story to represent them all, this book would be it. The author's name is Jang Jin-sung. He was one of the most famous poets in North Korea. And more importantly, he was Kim Jong-il's personal poet. Yeah, you heard that right. He basically had a poet on staff. Sounds absurd, right? Like, what does it even mean to have your own poet? So here's the case. The Kims ruled their country by guns and fear. But to Kim Jong-il, that was only half the equation. The other half, propaganda. So while the army marched, he was also busy shaping the message. And because he took it so seriously, writers and poets in North Korea ended up being treated like rock stars. Back in Kim Il-sung's era, novelists were the ones who got the most praise. Why? Because Kim Il-sung loved epic novels, especially one about himself. Towards the end of his life, he would sit around reading this massive biography called The Great Leader Kim Il-sung. So it was basically thousands of pages of his own life story. And every time he read it, he got so hyped. He even granted the author with the honorary title of merited writer, meaning the writer can leap into the elite class, where they get a free apartment and has unlimited food supply. But when Kim Jong-il took over, he wasn't really into novels. He switched to poetry. Why? Well, first of all, book is long, and Kim Jong-il couldn't sit still to finish it. He was kind of a guy who more into parties, drinking, riding motorcycles, and looking at young women dancing from his pleasure squad. So if TikTok had existed back in the day, I swear he would have spent all day scrolling dance videos. Also, there was a practical reason. During Kim Il-sung's era, the economy was holding together. But under Kim Jong-il, it collapsed. Even paper was in short supply. In fact, school textbook couldn't even be properly printed. So forget novels. Who has got paper for that? But poetry, oh yes. Poetry was perfect, nice and short. And the best of all, it saves paper. So only in North Korea does the fate of literature depends on office supplies, I guess. What kind of poetry was Kim Jong-il into? Well, the first and foremost, the short kind. Because God forbid he reads past a paragraph. And above all, it had to be dripping with flattery. Not just praise, but so over the top, it made Hallmark cards look subtle. The more cringe, the more he loved it. Our main character, Jang Jin-sung, his personal poet, raised to fame with a masterpiece called Spring Rest on the Gun Barrel of the General. I know the title itself already sounds pretty ridiculous. So here's a little taste of it. In the hand of the weak, a gun only brings murder. But in the hands of the great general, it conquers all. History proved that war and slaughter belong to the weak. But only General Kim Jong-il is the gun barrel king, the just king, the peaceful king, the unifying king, the true leader of the Korean people. You get the idea. Basically Shakespeare if Shakespeare had a gun to his head. The moment he heard the poem, Kim Jong-il came on the spot. He even told Jan, "You are the only one in this world who truly understands me." But here's the twist. How did someone so deeply favored by Kim Jong-il, one of his elite poets, end up crashing all the way down and risking everything to escape North Korea? In order to answer that question, we have to go all the way back to the first time they meet each other. It was a late night in 1999, when Jang Jin-sung got a phone call at his home in Pyongyang. The call came directly from the Central Party. And in North Korea, when the phone rings at a senior official's house in the middle of the night, it can only mean one of three things. Number one, South Korea and the US are running military drills and the war might be about to break out. Number two, you are about to get arrested. The police will show up in the middle of the night, drag you out, and you will either end up in the camp or executed. And there is option three, the realest of them all. The dear leader Kim Jong-il himself wants to see you. When Jan picked up the phone, he was very confident. He was sure it was option 3. And he was right. Shortly after the call, agents from the Ministry of the State Security showed up at his door, escorted him into a luxury Mercedes, and started driving him around central Pyongyang. They kept circling, turning, so he had no clue where he was. The car windows were covered with curtains, making it impossible to track the routes. And finally, after what felt like forever, the car stopped at a small train station on the outskirts of the city. But this was not a public station. It was a special station built in secret. And it was reserved for one purpose only: the private trains of the Kim dynasty. When Jang arrived at the station, he realized he was not the only one. Other high-ranking officials were also boarding the train. They were all heading to Kim Jong-il's midnight banquets. The moment Jang saw the others, he felt a sense of relief. Because if he had been the only one who summoned in the middle of the night, yeah, that usually means the only banquet you will see was your own execution. So once they boarded the train, a guard barked order with military stiffness: "Lie down immediately." Now here's the kicker. The train was a sleeper train, but you were not allowed to just sit in your bunk. No, you had to lie flat, silent, like a corpse being transported. If you needed to use the bathroom, you had to raise your hand and ask for permission, and then they will send someone to escort you to the bathroom. After a few hours in the dead of night, the train finally put into some remote coastal station. They couldn't tell where it was exactly, but they knew it was by the sea. From there, they were herded onto a yacht, heading to Kim Jong-il's seaside palace. Now, Jang had taken boats before. He was an elite. But after all, this one was noticeably faster, sleeker, nothing like the rusty North Korean vessels he was used to. Out of curiosity, he asked one of the men, "Are you guys Navy?" "No, we are the Central Guard." And here is where it gets interesting. The Central Guard was not part of the state military. They belonged solely to the Kim dynasty. Officially, it was part of the General Bureau of Guards, but in reality, it functioned more like Hitler's SS, sworn not to the nation, but to one man. And according to Jang, their numbers topped over 100,000. So after that yacht ride, they finally arrived at one of Kim Jong-il's seaside palaces. As soon as he entered the building, Jang was stunned. It was kind of over-the-top luxury he had never seen before. It was grand, opulent, white marble used everywhere, floors, tables, walls, with a giant Kim Jong-il's oil painting hanging overhead. They were told to wait there for the general's summons. After waiting for a few hours, finally a massive bodyguard burst through the door and shouted, "The general is coming." And then they heard faint footsteps, growing louder, faster, until finally there was Kim Jong-il himself. From a distance, his figure looked grand, but the closer he came, the more you realized just how small he really was. So Kim Jong-il finally appeared, dressed in his trademark yellow battle suit, walking slowly into the hall. But here's the twist. The first one through the door was not the general. It was a dog, a little white fluffy dog. Only after the dog made its grand entrance did Kim Jong-il walk in. And what he did? He didn't even glance at the officials who lined up for him. His full attention went straight to the dog. He bent down, scooped it up, and spent several long minutes just strolling its fur. Finally, after the petting session was over, he gave a little nod and told everybody to sit down. And honestly, the whole thing looked straight out of a movie. And in fact, it kind of was. If you have seen the Korean film The Spy Gone North, the banquet scene there is almost one-to-one copy of this moment, even down to the dog. Makes you wonder if the screenwriter had to read this book. So after Kim Jong-il finally sat down, he started to scan the room with his eyes, and then locked on Jang Jin-sung. He called him over and asked, "Hey, that poem, did you really write it? You look way too young." And remember, this was 1999. Jang was only 28 years old. And Kim kept pushing. "Did you write this or did you copy it? If you copied it, I will kill you." At that moment, Jang froze. He started sweating, stammering, completely unsure how to respond. Then Kim suddenly burst out laughing. "You freaking idiot, I'm just messing with you. The poem was great. That poem about the gun barrel, it touched my heart. You are a true model of this new age." And with that, he let Jang sit back down. Still drenched in cold sweat, not knowing what to make of this man who had just toyed with his life like it was a party trick. You see, at the time, Jang still had this godlike image of Kim, but others, like Kenji Fujimoto, his personal chef, knew much better. Fujimoto understood Kim's dark sense of humor. He loved to pull these sadistic little pranks, just to watch people uncomfortable. And if you managed to fire back with some witty, self-deprecating line, he would be thrilled, maybe even reward you. But if you froze, looking nervous and awkward, he thought you were boring. Later, after Jang returned to his seat, one of the ministers leaned over and whispered, "You idiot, why didn't you play along? When the general jokes, you have to joke back." Jang, still shaken, muttered, "What was I supposed to say?" The minister replied smoothly, "Easy. You should have said, 'Hey, General, even if you shoot me and I become a ghost, I will still serve you with my loyalty.'" See? That's why he is a minister. That's the kind of bullying lines that get you promoted in North Korea. And then the banquet began. Now, this wasn't like any dinner he was experienced. Using his word, it was bizarre, almost cult-like. What happens here is that with every new dish, the lighting in the hall actually changed color. When the salads and the vegetable came out, the lights turned green and purple. When the red meats, pork, beef was served, the lights switched to dark red. When the fish course arrived, the entire hall was bathed in an orange glow. Honestly, the whole aesthetic was so tacky. It definitely was not designed by Kenji Fujimoto. A chef from Japan would have had way better taste. This was next level dictator kitsch. In this banquet, one ritual mattered above all, the toasts. Everyone knew that when you drank with the general, he would hand a cup one by one, and you would toast directly with him. And here is the kicker. Once you clinked glasses with Kim Jong-il, you got to keep that cup. People took them home, displayed them in glass cabinets, like some kind of holy relic. The more cup you had, the higher your status in North Korea's hierarchy. Jang, being so young at the time, got his very first cup at the night. So during the toast, Kim was in high spirits, showering Jang with more praise. Jang also realized he was the youngest person in the entire banquet, which made him feel a strange mix of pride and honor. Then came dessert. Kim gave a small wave of his hand, and suddenly every single guest was served ice cream that was on fire. Jang stared in shock. He would have never seen anything like it. He almost shoveled the whole flaming scoop straight into his mouth, until a minister quickly stopped him. Hey young man, you can blow it out first. You don't have to swallow the fire." Jang laughed nervously and thought, wow, even the supreme leader's ice cream is on another level. After the flaming ice cream, it was time for the best part of the evening, the pleasure squad's performance. A group of young women in revealing outfits came out singing and dancing. For Jang, it was really shocking. He has never seen something like this. He thought to himself, wait, women actually dance with 3/4 of their boobs showing? And just when he thought the show was wild enough, a singer performed a Russian ballad. Jang didn't understand a single word, but the melody was sad. And as the singer's voice carried through the hall, Kim Jong-il himself started to lean forward, singing along, and visibly moved. Before long, he put out a handkerchief and began to whip. Maybe it reminded him of his childhood in the Soviet Union. After all, Kim was born there and spoke some Russian. But here's the thing. When the general cried, everyone else panicked. What do you do when your dictator bursts into tears? Simple, you cry too. So one by one, the minister fished out their handkerchiefs and joined in, dabbing their eyes, sniffling along. The whole scene was surreal. Minutes earlier, the hall had been filled with music and laughter. Now it had turned into mass funeral. Jang, while inexperienced, quickly realized he had to play along. He thought hard about the most painful memories of his life, forced out a few tears. And then, just as suddenly as it began, Kim stuffed his handkerchief back into his pocket, sat down, and calmly went back to drinking. Then everyone else followed his lead, handkerchiefs away, glasses up. And the crying session instantly turned back into drinking party. And so, another round of toasts began. During the first toast, one of the ministers had already warned Jang, don't let your eyes wander. Whatever you do, don't look straight into the general's eyes. Instead, focus on his second button. Stare at it if you must, but never make direct eye contact with him. For some reason, Kim Jong-il hated people looking straight into his eyes. But by the second round of toasts, Jang was a little tipsy, and his curiosity got the better of him. He still didn't dare to look Kim in the eyes, but he glanced under the table, and that's when he noticed Kim had slipped off his shoes, 2 feet scratching each other non-stop. And those shoes? They're incredibly tall. Jang estimated the lift inside the shoes must have been the height of an entire wine glasses. Imagine wearing elevator shoes that high and somehow not sprain your ankle. Say what you will, but the man had the balance. Then came another surprise. As a poet, Jang had expected refined language from a man who lived in palace. Instead, Kim's words were shockingly crude. He tossed out phrases like freaking bastard as he ordered people to pour his drink. Hardly the vocabulary of a royal court. The banquet carried out until next morning. Exactly Kim Jong-il's routine. Start at midnight, end at sunrise. By then, the general was satisfied, and the ministers staggered home clutching their holy wine cup like trophies. For Jang, as strange and terrifying as it was, this night would go down as the most glorious moment of his career. From that moment, Jang's status skyrocketed. In North Korea, when the general personally praises and promotes you, there is a word for it. It's called 칭수자, meaning someone who is personally blessed by the leader. So once you're in that category, you enjoy special privileges, and nobody dare touch you unless you commit treason or something outrageous. So even though Jang was just a low-level staff at his department, everyone knew he was destined to rise, one day maybe even minister. But here's the twist. Despite his status, his actual salary was really tiny. In his own book, he said if you converted it into US dollar, it came out to $2 a month. But as someone personally favored by Kim Jong-il, a 칭수자, he got lots of monthly gifts. Imported canned food, cigarettes, liquor, nice clothes. On the black market, those were worth hundreds of dollars. So in practice, his monthly income was in the hundreds of US dollars. Compared to the average North Korean scraping by, he was loaded. And Jang also came from privilege to begin with. His grandparents had fought alongside Kim Il-sung back in World War II. Basically, the family was second-generation revolutionaries. Adding Jang's personal blessing from Kim Jong-il, the family's position in North Korea was rock solid. So in Pyongyang, Jang lived rich. Some even say whenever he goes out, he casually carries around $1,000 in cash, something unimaginable for ordinary citizens. But here's the thing. In North Korea, not anyone can write poem. If you're not officially assigned to the propaganda apparatus and you start writing verse, even praise for the general, that's considered treason. You can potentially get executed. In North Korea, only authorized departments are allowed to compose literature. For our author, he worked in one of those authorized departments, the Special Wing of United Front Department. The United Front Department is basically North Korea's hybrid intelligence and diplomacy machine. It handles everything related to South Korea: intelligence, infiltration, agitation, propaganda, even attempt to turn people over to their side. Inside that machine was an even more secret unit called Office 101. And here is a useful point. The regime's most sensitive organs usually do not have public names, just numbers. People in the upper tiers of North Korean society understand those codes immediately. So what does Office 101 do? It runs secret external propaganda. So what I mean by secret? Because Pyongyang wants the brainwashing to feel organic, not advertised. So what do? They plant fake foreign-looking articles praising North Korea, insulting South Korea, and even trying to recruit or agitate South Korean audiences. Back in the 1960s and 70s, this kind of operation actually worked quite well. South Korea was less developed back then, and North Korea was getting subsidies from the Soviet Union and China. At that time, Koreans living abroad sometimes saw returning to North Korea as a good option. But by the 1980s, and especially after the 1990s, North Korea lost that pool. So the work of Office 101 evolved into large-scale external public relation. Write glowing pieces in the voice of foreigners praising Kim and defending the regime. Even my YouTube channel gets plenty of dislikes and comments defending the dear leader and his regime. Pretty sure those folks are straight out of this department. So if you want to support free speech instead of dictatorship, help me out by like, subscribe, and hype this video so we can negate the impact of those comments. Jang's job in Office 101, he literally pretended to be a South Korean writer day in and day out, churning out articles celebrating Kim's leadership and North Korea's great victories. So in order to convincingly mimic South Koreans, the office forced its staff to localize themselves. Basically, everyone in Office 101 has a carefully crafted cover identity. Like, I'm from Seoul, Gangnam District, and my father is a professor, that kind of thing. They practiced living and spoke as South Korean. That means they need constant immersion. So this office has tons of first-hand access to Korea's TV shows, magazines, newspapers, and films, brought in as top priority materials. But none of that material could ever leave Office 101. The books and tapes were strictly for library use inside the unit. Taking them out was a serious crime. Now, Kim Jong-il had this famous motto: rule the country with poetry and art, which is why on North Korea's biggest holidays, they held a national poetry competition. So this time, the spotlight fell on Kim Il-sung's birthday, the Day of Song. The assigned theme for the national poetry contest was a piece titled The Smiling Song. So if you've ever seen portraits of Kim Il-sung, You will know he's always painted with a little grin, showing his teeth. The task this time was to explain, why does the leader always smile? What is he smiling about? If you ask me that question, I would say he smiled because he got the last slice of cake in the entire country. After getting this task, everyone in that department was racking their brains. But everything they wrote sounded corny as hell. They wrote stuff like, the leader smiles at the sight of our nation's construction, or he smiles at the people's joy. Their boss, the minister, got furious. You are all idiots. This stuff has zero creativity. Writing like this, you all will be executed. Then he barked, bring in Jang Jin-sung. Let's see what ideas he has. When Jang walked in, his coworkers are all chain smoking in silence. Then he dropped the bomb. One brilliant idea. The moment he said it, everyone perked up, cigarettes out, eyes wide open. His pitch? Look, we can't just write about smiles in the most literal way. That's too shallow, that's too corny, right? Instead, we write from tears to smiles. We write contrasts. First, the leader cries, then the leader smiles. The minister leaned in. Keep going. Jang explained. Our leader was born in 1912, right? What kind of era was that? Korea under rule of Japanese invaders. The people were suffering. He was born into an age of sorrow. From childhood, he saw his people in pain, but as a great revolutionary, he fought for 60 years. And finally, he brought smiles back to this world. Here's the case. If the author had been a YouTuber, I would have been totally out of business. After he said that, the room exploded. Thunderous applause, cheers. Even the minister himself thought the idea was brilliant. So brilliant to the point that he decided to give Jang 6 months off, just to focus on writing this one poem. No more pretending to be a fake South Korean on the internet, just 6 months of poetry. Still, the minister worried he'd get too much distracted in Pyongyang, so he suggested, why not write somewhere else? Jang asked, where the hell am I supposed to go? The minister smiled, go back to your hometown. Take a break, relax, it will help. So here's the thing, Jang was not born in Pyongyang. His hometown was a city about 30 to 40 miles away called Sariwon. He thought, that's actually not a bad idea. I can check out my old friends, see how the people are living, and as a writer, I need real experience anyway. But that vacation changed everything. So to get back to his hometown Sariwon, Jang had to take the train. But here's the thing about trains in North Korea. They almost never run on time. Why? First, there is constant shortages. And second, and this is the big one, the tracks always have to be cleared for the Kim's family's private trains. If the leader's train is coming, everyone else stops. Sometimes for a half day, sometimes for a full day. In North Korea, no one asks what time the train comes. They ask what day. A half day late, normal. A whole day late, still normal. The only thing not normal is the train actually shows up on time. And the trains themselves, it has different classes as well, like airlines with first class, business class, and economy. But here, the class was not about money. Tickets all cost the same. It was about status. Ordinary worker got cramped into cars packed shoulder to shoulder, standing room only. Soldiers and mid-level officials had their own sections. And at the very top, the cadre carriage reserved for central officials. That car was practically always empty. 10 or 15 seats total, usually just occupied by just 3 to 4 people. Meanwhile, the regular people's car were bursting at the seams. Jang, of course, didn't bother with the crowd. He went straight into the cadre carriage. Why? Because he carried a golden ticket, his United Front Department ID. This wasn't your average work badge. It had a golden party emblem stamped right on it. Most local staffers had never even seen one before. To them, anyone holding that ID had to be the top official. So every time Jang flashed it, trains, offices, checkpoints, you name it, no one dared to stop him. Not only no one dared to stop him, but they usually give him a lot of respect. So when Jang returned home, the first person he wanted to see wasn't a relative, but his childhood best friend, his old neighbor, Yong-nam. For Jang, going home meant revisiting childhood memories. Yong-nam had always been like a brother to him. But Yong-nam wasn't just any ordinary kid. He was what they called a returnee from Japan. In fact, he shared the same background as Ko Young-hee, Kim Jong-il's favorite mistress. Starting in the late 1950s up until late 1970s, waves of Koreans living in Japan repatriated to North Korea. You may wonder why would anyone move into North Korea? Well, after World War II, life in Japan was pretty tough, and the Koreans often faced lots of discrimination in Japan. At the same time, Pyongyang was pumping out propaganda, selling North Korea as a socialist paradise. Jobs, housing, security, everything is guaranteed. And unlike the laughable propaganda Jang himself later wrote at Office 101, this one actually worked. Tens of thousands of Koreans in Japan believed it. They packed up and moved back, only to discover that it was all a scam. By then, of course, it was too late to leave. When Yongnam's family first arrived, they lived like royalty. They had money, relatives in Japan who sent gifts and cash, and imported products no one else in North Korea had seen. Jang, even as a kid who grew up in an elite family, had never seen such things. There is one story that really shows the difference. Yongnam's family had a Japanese piano. Jang's father made a deal with Yongnam's father. Give me your piano and I will get you an apartment. Yes, you heard that right. An entire apartment in exchange for a piano. But that also shows how powerful Jang's father was. And that's how Jang grew up with a Japanese piano at home. But over the years, Jang watched Yongnam's family decline. Returnees from Japan were never given proper jobs. The way they were discriminated against was even worse than they were treated in Japan. Forced to live off their savings. Year by year, they sold off their possessions, waiting for remittance from relatives in Japan. Until eventually their grandparents passed away, the money stopped coming, and the family eventually slipped into poverty. So when Jang stepped off the train that day, he was shocked. His once strong, broad-shouldered friend now looked like an old man, gaunt, frail, aged far beyond his 28 years. Jang asked him what happened. Yongnam just gave a weary smile. Nothing, this is just life here. And then he led Jang back into the neighborhood, where they once played as a kid. The moment Jang stepped back into his old neighborhood, a chill ran down his spine. The place that once felt lively was now in ruins. Streets were silent, buildings crumbling, everything bleak. People slumped by the roadside, collapsed like broken dolls, or just sat there, half dead from hunger. Jang asked what was wrong. Yongnam simply sighed, what else? They are starving. When they turned a corner, especially near an abandoned park, Jang saw something worse. Bodies. People who had starved to death. Yongnam told him, hey, don't worry, someone will come to pick up them later. And here's the detail that really drives it home. During the arduous March famine, every city in North Korea had an official job titled corpse collector. If someone dropped dead in hunger, the collector came with carts, loaded the bodies, and dumped them in mass graves. And that was a full-time job. That evening, Jang gathered with his relatives for dinner, but the scene was really disturbing. His family and neighbors hunched over their food, faces hollow and skeletal. If you ask me, I would describe this scene looked more like the famous Van Gogh's painting, The Potato Eaters. Except this was not peasant eating potatoes, they look more like a ghost at the table. And then came the moment that truly broke him. Across the table sat a girl from his childhood, one of his classmates, and also his first crush. Back in elementary school, she was the prettiest girl in the class. They used to play pretend together. Jang was the prince and she was the princess. But now, at only 28, she already looked decades older. Her body had wasted away, her eyes sunken, her beauty was completely gone. And the worst part, she couldn't even look at him. Her head stayed bowed the entire time, full of shame. Once the class flower, now reduced by hunger to little more than a skeleton. During the dinner, one of Jang's relatives came in from the countryside to see him. Well, dinner is a generous term. It was really just tea gathering. They sat around drinking water because there wasn't any food. The relative leaned in and asked, hey, Jin-sung, we heard you became one of leaders chosen, even had dinner with him. Tell us, what's the general's favorite kind of porridge? Why porridge? In their minds, porridge was the ultimate delicacy. So even imagining Kim Jong-il's meals, they assumed the very best thing he could possibly eat was porridge. Then another relative chimed in. Didn't they say General only eats 1 grain of rice a day? Is that true? Of course, Jang couldn't say it was a lie. He was mumbled something vague. He said, the general is remarkable. He cares deeply about the people. But then he noticed something strange. Some relatives didn't even show up that night. He asked why. The others just replied coldly. Oh, those people, they starved to death. The words hit him like ice. The room suddenly felt dark, cold, terrifying. It wasn't just the fact that people he knew had died, it was how casually the others said it. As if starvation had become ordinary, nothing worth a reaction. At that moment, Jang felt like his relatives had become strangers. their face blank, their eyes empty, like zombies out of a horror movie, emotionless and numb. And then, through the silence, came shouting outside, a voice loud, wild, like a madman. Jan recognized the voice instantly. He rushed to the window and looked out. And there he was, the apple tree grandpa. Why that name? Because back when Jan was little, this old man was the kindest soul in the neighborhood. He had a huge apple tree in the yard, and every harvest season, he would share the apples with the kids. That's why everyone called him Apple Tree Grandpa. Apple Tree Grandpa's family used to be happy and whole. He had a son, a daughter-in-law, and a beautiful little granddaughter. But now, here he was, wandering like a madman. Jan's relatives explained the tragedy with chilling calm, as if recounting the weather. When the famine began, Grandpa's son quickly fell ill from hunger and died. His daughter-in-law, rumored to be very beautiful, left soon after. To survive, she ran off with a bandit, or maybe just some thug, abandoning her father-in-law and her young daughter. That left only Grandpa and his granddaughter clinging to each other, surviving however they could. Their only hope was the apple from his tree, selling a few for food. But the previous year, when the harvest finally came, disaster struck. Every single apple was stolen. The tree was stripped bare. The shock was too much for the girl. That very night, she hid herself beneath the apple tree. When Grandpa found her, he lost his mind. In a fit of grief, he chopped the tree down himself. From that day on, he was never the same. Just a broken man roaming the streets, raving like a lunatic. And now Jan could see it. Grandpa too was nearly finished, starving, weak, barely clinging to life. In that moment, Jan felt crushed. His hometown, once full of warmth and childhood memories, was now nothing but a vision of hell on earth. The very next day, Jan's best friend Yongnam invited him over for a meal. They brought out a large covered dish. When it was lifted, inside was half a bowl of rice. Not even good rice, rough broken grains that looked like leftovers. Around it were a few tiny side dishes. Some pickled cucumbers, a bit of salted vegetable. That was it. And the whole family, sitting like a ghost around the table, said to him, "Hey, please eat. This half bowl of rice, we save it grain by grain for 2 months. We save it just for you." Jan nearly broke down in tears. He couldn't eat, but he also couldn't insult their sacrifice. So he made an excuse. "Oh, I already ate plenty on the train. I'm having some indigestion. You guys should eat instead." But Yongnam's mother insisted. "Hey, you must eat it. Don't you look down on this rice?" Finally, Jan couldn't take it anymore. He admitted, "Hey, I'm not hungry." And from his bag, he had pulled the gifts he had brought. These are some precious canned meat and even a bottle of Hennessy, one of the luxury liquor Kim Jong-il had once gifted him. He placed them on the table and said, "Hey, I'm not hungry, and I want you guys to eat this." The family stared at the cans and the bottle in disbelief. These were treasures. They hesitated, passing the food back and forth. "Hey, father, you should eat." "No, give it to your mom." Mother said, "I will pass. Let's just wait for Yongnam's sister to come back from her night shift at the factory. We will then eat together." The silence was unbearable. Finally, Yongnam's father sighed. "If we're not eating, let's at least drink." Then he opened up the Hennessy. When he saw the liquor, he was stunned. He whispered that it had been nearly 20 years since he had last seen a bottle like this. Back in Japan, he would have drunk it casually. Now it felt like another world. He downed a glass, then another, growing more emotional as the alcohol loosened his tongue. He began to speak bitterly. "Look at us now. From Japan to this, struggling over half a bowl of rice. We're not strangers to good food. But now this. Why did we ever come back? Why did we ever return to North Korea? We have doomed our whole family to futureless life." And his wife tried to comfort him. "Hey, there's no use in regret now. All we can think about is surviving tomorrow." But her words only deepened the silence. Yongnam's father sank into a long, heavy quiet. For Jan, this scene was unbearable. He had lived in Pyongyang, and he had some sense of how people live in Seoul. But he had no idea that less than 100 kilometers from the capital, his own hometown of Sariwon had been reduced to this. Starvation was not just a story, it was the daily reality. He couldn't take it anymore. The next morning, he made up an excuse to head back to Pyongyang. So Jan only stayed in Sariwon for a day, before preparing to head back to Pyongyang. His friend Yongnam insisted, "Hey, if this is your last day, we must go to the market. I want to send you off with some gifts." But Jang refused. No. I will buy you a gift. Because what had really struck him was how poor Yongnan had become. Once the rich kids of the neighborhood, now he didn't even have proper shoes. Just rags falling apart. So the next day, they went to Saryang's largest open-air market. Jang wanted to buy him a decent pair of shoes. Yongnan grew more emotional as they walked in, venting his frustration. Hey Jang, tell me, do you think I will ever see Pyongyang? Jang stayed silent, because he knew the truth. Yongnan would be never allowed there. As a returnee from Japan, his bloodline marked him forever. Pyongyang was out of reach for him. Yongnan saw the silence and gave a bitter laugh. I know, my life is finished. I will never see what you have seen. My world begins here and ends here. The market itself was bleak, half empty, and also the market is technically illegal, but tolerated by the government. Without them, everyone would have just starved to death. He searched for good shoes, but found nothing but junk. Finally, he picked out a pair of cheap, Chinese-made leather shoes. But before they could leave, soldiers surrounded the market. Hey everyone, assemble in the square. Public execution. Jang was shocked. Yongnan explained calmly. What? Pyongyang didn't have this? Around here it's normal. If you are unlucky enough to be in the market while they have execution, you have to watch it. After they finish, usually after about an hour, then they will let you go. They walked to the square. At the center was a frail, silent man. Hands tied, forced to kneel. A soldier pressed a gun to his back of his head. His crime? Stealing a single sack of rice. When the author looked around the square, he noticed slogans screamed from the banners. Talk politics, shot. Waste grain, shot. Theft, shot. Counter-revolutionary thought, shot. The word shot was basically everywhere. Then the shot ran out. The man collapsed instantly, dead in front of the crowd. Nobody flinched, nobody screamed, nobody gasped. The crowd simply dispersed like zombies, silent, expressionless, while soldiers dragged the body away. Jang felt sick. He wanted to vomit. And the very same day, he returned back to Pyongyang, carrying with him a heavy heart. After what he had seen in his hometown, he realized he could no longer write about the smiling sun. Because once you have seen the real world, there is no way you can go back to writing lies. So he went to his minister and made an excuse. Hey boss, after much reflection, I feel this idea of writing from tears to smile is too risky, politically dangerous. Better to let a more experienced comrade to handle it. I will just step aside. So basically for the next 2-3 years, Jang stopped caring about his work, about his promotions. He just drifted, doing the bare minimum to get by. In Pyongyang, he had one particular close friend, Yang Ming, another key figure in this story. They had known each other since middle school. Remember how Jang had a piano at home as a kid? Because of his piano skills, he got admitted to Pyongyang's top art school, reserved for the children of the elite. And that's where he met Yang Ming. Yang Ming's family background was really powerful. His grandmother had once been a close comrade of Kim Il-sung himself, legendary enough to appear in history books. His father was the vice minister of the Ministry of State Security, basically North Korea's version of CIA. And not just vice minister in name, he was the one with real power. So why did two of them, sons of privilege, ended up wasting their youth, living aimlessly? The answer lies in the arduous March years, during Kim Jong-il's famine and the purge. We have talked about the Xinhua incident, a campaign to root out anyone with suspected disloyalty. The purge was overseen by none other than our old friend Jang Song-thaek, Kim Jong-il's brother-in-law, who used it as an opportunity to expand his own power. Yang Ming's father became a victim, accused of making an offhand remark that disrespected the leader. He was arrested and thrown into a prison camp. There he was brutally tortured. He was eventually released without a formal charge, but the damage was done. 2 weeks later, he died from the beating. The family overall status remained intact. They were not really affected by this incident. But for Yang Ming, from that point on, he was utterly disillusioned with the Kim dynasty. Yang Ming's workplace was, let's just say, not your typical 9-to-5. So North Korea had two major orchestras. One was the Pochangbo Electric Ensemble, which performed flashy synth pop for the mass. The other was the Court Orchestra, which played European classic music exclusively for Kim Jong-il inside his palaces. Now, Kim Jong-il loved his Beethoven and Mozart almost as much as he loved his mistresses. So as a court musician, Yang Ming got a front row seat to Kim's private life. The booze, the women, the pleasure squad shows. Honestly, he probably ran into Kenji Fujimoto all the time too. So these two guys, Yong-min and our author Jan, they were both disillusioned insiders. They would hang out at each other's apartments in Pyongyang, swap gossip, complain about the regime, and basically trauma bond over dictatorship tea. Yong-min spilled palace secrets, Jan shared contraband South Korean magazines from his departments. But then, disaster happened. Just shortly after New Year's celebration, Jan slipped Yong-min a South Korean book, basically a tell-all exposed on the Kim dynasty. Pretty much an equivalent to my YouTube channel, which is totally banned material in North Korea. Yong-min took it home and left it on the subway. His bag with the book inside rolled away as the train door closed. When he realized what he had done, he panicked. He ran to Jan's place pale as a ghost, told what exactly happened to Jan. Jan, upon hearing the news, nearly collapsed. Because this wasn't some small-time violation. Just possessing a foreign magazine was a treason. But this wasn't just any magazine. It was a full-blown anti-Kim tell-all. The kind of thing that could get you executed, or at the best, sent you to rot in a labor camp. They both were terrified. At first, they seriously considered suicide to avoid torture. But after a few drinks, their courage, or maybe just the alcohol kicked in, they looked at each other and said the same word: defection. Let's run for it. Jan, ever the pragmatist, immediately saw the obstacles. First was the psychological one. If they fled, their family would pay the price. In North Korea, collective punishment meant his parents, his sister, even her sister's children would be thrown into camps. He doesn't really address this much in the book, probably too painful to write about it, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. And the second was more of a practical problem. You see, in North Korea you can't just pick up your suitcase and travel. Movement between cities requires a travel permit. Going to border regions, that needs a special kind of permit, nearly impossible to get unless you are government insiders. And without one, if you are caught near the border, it's execution time. Luckily, Jan had connections. He went to Kim Il-sung University, the Harvard of North Korea, where all the elite kids studied. One of his classmates had a trading company near the border and could issue special permits. So Jan went to him and said, "Hey buddy, I need two." His friend joked, "What you doing with those? Planning to defect?" So here's the case, right? Nobody could imagine a privileged guy like Jan, an official poet, a personal favorite of Kim Jong-il, risking everything to run. But still, he agreed. Normally it's $200 per pass, but for you, just $100. Yes, you heard that correct. Considering the average salary in North Korea was about $2 a month, that was an insane amount of money. But Jan was rich by local standards, so he said, "Fine, just give me two." After they getting the permits, he thought they would have a couple more days before the authorities traced the missing book. But the very next morning, state security showed up at his office. And not just any branch, it is the dreaded 10th Bureau, the unit that specializes in interrogating the elites. There were a total of 3 officers, led by a cold veteran interrogator. He went straight to the point. "So, Comrade Jan, tell me more about this book." Jan froze. His mind went blank. He stammered. I brought it home to read. That was my mistake. Sorry. But I don't know how it disappeared. It must have been stolen. The officer smirked. "We found this in a bag on the subway. And a funny thing, according to your schedule, there is no way you could have been on that train. So tell me who had this book? Who else read this book? And why wasn't it returned?" He grilled him with those 3 questions over and over for hours. Finally, the officer leaned in and said, "Look, think about those questions. We'll be back tomorrow. Tell us the name of your accomplices, and your punishment will be lighter." To be honest, that was already an enormous amount of mercy. If Jan hadn't been one of Kim's favorites, he had already been in chains. By the time he left work, his legs were trembling. His boss put him aside and said, "Hey, look, this could go either way. If it blows up, we're all screwed. But if you play smart, maybe it blows over. Think hard, don't hide anything, okay?" Jan nodded, but in his head, he was already gone. As soon as he walked out of the office, he immediately spotted there was agents following him. Just then, by sheer luck, a real Pyongyang taxi pulled up. Oh, by the way, normally taxis were for foreigners. But Jan had a US dollar in his pocket. He jumped in and told the driver, "Take me to the Koryo Hotel. Hurry." At the hotel, he slipped out through a hidden back exit he knew from his Playboy days. then ducked into a nearby barbecue restaurant with another secret exit. After weaving through alleys, he finally shook up the agent who was following him. From there, he took another cab straight to the train station. At the platform, Yongming was waiting. Both men clutched their freshly printed border passes. They boarded the train out of Pyongyang, making the start of their desperate escape. And yep, that's where the movie-worthy part of the story really kicks off. So I don't know how many people is gonna watch this video, to be honest, since this is a really long video. But if this video hits 1,000 likes, I will consider to make a video that covers how they put off their escape from North Korea. But in case if I don't make that video, you can also buy the book from the link that I included in the description section. It's an affiliate link that ties to my name, so if you buy through my link, it'll be a huge support to this channel. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, hype, and subscribe. With that, I will see you in the next one.